Title on the Curse of Shadow Valley. Deep in the heart of Ohio, far from the bustling cities and quiet towns, lies a forgotten place known only to the few brave enough to speak its name. Shadow Valley. The valley is nestled between two ancient hills, cloaked in mist and shadow, where no light seems to reach. For centuries, it has been a place of whispered fears, where even the animals refuse to tread. Locals say it's cursed, haunted by forces that no one fully understands. But every few years, someone decides to ignore the warnings and venture into the valley. None of them are ever the same again. It all began over 100 years ago, when settlers first tried to build a small town on the edge of the valley. They called it Prospect, hoping for a bright future. But the valley had other plans. Strange things started happening almost immediately. Crops withered overnight, animals disappeared without a trace, and people began to hear strange noises echoing from the valley at dusk. They described it as a low, rumbling sound, almost like a growl, but coming from deep within the earth. One night, a young boy named Samuel wandered too close to the valley's edge. He was drawn to the strange glow that flickered just beyond the tree line, a light that seemed to pulse and breathe like it was alive. Despite his mother's warnings, Samuel couldn't resist. He crossed the threshold into the valley, stepping into a world that was not meant for him. Hours passed and Samuel didn't return. His parents searched all night, calling his name into the cold, misty air. But all they heard was silence. It wasn't until dawn that Samuel stumbled back into the village, his clothes torn and his eyes wide with terror. He didn't speak a word for days. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. "The shadow, they were alive," he said, shaking. "They whispered to me, told me things I didn't want to hear. They showed me things." From that day on, the town of Prospect began to change. People started seeing things in the valley. Dark figures moving just out of sight, glowing eyes watching from the trees. At night, the ground would tremble as if something massive was shifting beneath the surface. The town became consumed with fear, and within a year it was abandoned. The settlers left, and the valley was left to the shadows. For decades, Shadow Valley remained a ghost story, a place you avoided at all costs. But not everyone believed in the curse. In the 1990s, a group of college students from a nearby university decided to investigate the valley, hoping to debunk the local myths. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, they set off, excited by the prospect of finding something extraordinary. They entered the valley just before sunset, laughing and joking as they set up camp. But as darkness fell, the mood quickly shifted. The air became thick, heavy with something unexplainable. One of the students, Lisa, said she felt like they were being watched. The others brushed it off, until the noises began. It was a low rumble at first, just like the settlers had described all those years ago. But then it grew louder, more distinct, like something massive was moving beneath the earth, getting closer. Suddenly, their equipment began to malfunction. Cameras turned off on their own, lights flickered, and the temperature dropped rapidly. And then from the mist, they saw them, the shadows, dark, twisting forms that slithered across the ground and through the trees, circling them. One of the students, Brian, tried to run, but the ground beneath him seemed to shift and ripple, like he was running on quicksand. He fell, screaming, as the shadows swarmed him. The others watched in horror as Brian was dragged into the mist, his screams fading until there was nothing but silence. The remaining students fled the valley, abandoning their equipment and their friend. When they reached safety, they were hysterical, unable to explain what had happened. The footage they had managed to capture before the equipment failed showed little. A few glimpses of the shadows, the mist swirling unnaturally. But one thing stood out, a voice faint but unmistakable, whispering from the depths of the valley. "Leave. This place is not yours." To this day, no one has dared to venture back into Shadow Valley. The curse remains, a dark, malevolent force that guards its secrets. Those who live nearby say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the rumbling from the valley, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, you might even catch a glimpse of the shadows moving, watching, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to enter their domain.